radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, Memorial Day, May 27th. I hope everybody is having a good day, had a good weekend. It's a long weekend for most of you. As you can see, I'm on the road. I am in Miami to teach a course at the Peterson Academy tomorrow. It'll be on finance, so we're doing an 8-hour course on finance. I'll do 4 hours tomorrow and 4 hours on Wednesday. Fly back home on Thursday, hopefully be able to do a show sometime on Thursday, and then we're back to a normal hour on Friday. So that is the schedule. As I said, this is Miami. Not bad in terms of setup. I think the internet is pretty strong. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it'll hold up. All right, let's see. Program for today. We will do. I've got a few news items I want to do. I'll do them fairly quickly, and want to say maybe a word about Memorial Day, and then we'll go back to the discussion we started having on Friday, about money, interest, inflation, investments, and finish that up. That was a sponsored show. It had a whole list of questions. I answered a few of them, but we've still got quite a long list of things to cover. So I'll be doing that. Super Chat is open, is available. So feel free to ask questions, support the show with a sticker. You know the drill, do your thing. John has already got us started off with a long 7-post question. We will get to that. We will get to that later. All right, let's see. What else do we have to do? No, I'll just say Memorial Day, it's interesting. It's an interesting day, particularly coming from Israel. In Israel, Memorial Day is a very solemn day. It's a day of a lot of sad music on the radio, a lot of memorial services all over the country. It's a day where you get, I think twice during the day, you get the sirens go off and the whole country just stops. People stop in the middle of the highway. Everybody stops, they get out of their cars, everybody stands for a moment of silence. You get that, I think, twice during the day. And it's very kind of solemn. And then the next day is Independence Day. So you go from this very solemn day to a very celebratory day. But the two, of course, are connected. It's the willingness of those who gave up their lives to fight for the freedom that we all enjoy that makes the Independence Day possible. So it is directly connected. When I first came to the United States, and Memorial Day was basically a day where you went shopping or you went to barbecuing, and it was just a normal day, kind of a long weekend, just something to celebrate and have fun around. It was very strange. It was very disconcerting. On the other hand, it's very American. It's very we live our lives. We go on. Life goes on, and people fought to make it possible for us to live our lives and to keep going. So it's there's a certain American spirit to it, and at the same time, it's very disconcerting for somebody who comes from Israel, in terms of what exactly people think about it, what they're actually, and particularly for the families of fallen soldiers, it must be really weird because they're obviously at memorial services and things like that, and yet the country is completely ignoring them. People out there are ignoring them. But it's exactly for that normalcy, for fighting for that normalcy is exactly what the soldiers fight for. So that would be my explanation for it all. Okay, we're on the topic of war, so let's turn to a few stories about war and other stuff, and not a lot of stories. I don't have a lot of stories today. I want to get to the finance stuff. I also view that to some extent as preparatory for my lectures tomorrow. The content that I'm doing for the Peterson Academy, I've never really put it together quite like this. This package is new and is a little different. And anyway, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it goes well. Let's see. Yes, let's start with the incident that happened yesterday. So yesterday, Israel bombed I guess it was I'm not sure if it was a building or a tent in which senior Hamas leaders were meeting. And this is, there were three in particular senior Hamas leaders, two of whom were in charge of Hamas operations, both in the West Bank and in Israel proper. So they were responsible for planning, funding, providing logistics for terrorist operations initiated by Hamas in the West Bank and anyway in Israel proper. Both very senior people, and then the third was another senior person who I guess had been released, who was serving a life sentence in an Israeli jail, was released during hostage negotiations for Shalit, the soldier who was kidnapped years ago and for whom Israel released 1,000 people. He had murdered two people, serving a life sentence, and was released, and in return to Hamas, returned to being a terrorist. Anyway, they had intelligence. They bombed it. The bombing set off a fire, and it's not clear who exactly was in the same facility as these three Hamas leaders. But the bottom line is, it appears that something like 35 civilians died in the bombing with the Hamas at the same time as the Hamas leaders. And the world went apoplectic. I mean, civilians are dying in Gaza every day. 35 is not a necessarily high number. I mean, maybe it turns out that Israel's bombing over and over and over again for the last 7 months are not killing civilians. And maybe that's why the world chose this to get pissed off at. But the reality is that, Hamas operatives, Hamas leaders are surrounding themselves with civilians. And Hamas, and of course, it's almost impossible in a dense area, and this is an area where there were a lot of tents. It's almost impossible in a dense area like that to actually bomb it in a way that it has no impact on everybody else. So of course, some civilians are going to die. This is, of course, the nature of war, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to make it any different. This is the reality. But anyway, the world went apoplectic. I mean, everybody condemned Israel. Israel went apoplectic. I mean, this is the thing about this ideology of altruism. Israel is not spared from it at all. So newspapers in Israel, how could Israel do this? What is going on? This has to stop, this has to end. And of course, this is in Rafah. Somehow the American administration has conjured up this idea that Rafah is some separate entity, some different thing that different rules apply to. So it's in Rafah. So everybody says, oh, Israel has to stop the operation in Rafah, which means stop the operation in Gaza completely. Just bizarre. The whole thing is bizarre because, again, this is not the first time 35 civilians have died in one day. I assume, in the Gaza, although, again, most of the people dying in Israel's attacks are Hamas operatives. So maybe it was the ratio. Anyway, everybody went crazy. Israel said it's under investigation, which they always say. And then Netanyahu came out and said, it's a tragic mistake. God. A tragic mistake would be not to kill the three Hamas operatives. God. I mean, how can you take this man seriously? On the one hand, he goes out and he says tough things about victory and necessity to win and to completely destroy Hamas and to make it impossible for them to function and all of this. And you go, yeah, what a speech. And then he says something like this, a tragic mistake. There's nothing mistaken about this. This is a success. 3 senior leaders of Hamas were killed. That is a win. The civilian casualties, however numbered they are, however many they are, the civilian casualties are a consequence of Hamas leaders hiding among civilians and a consequence of Hamas initiating a war. And in war, people die. And in war, civilians die. And in war, if you want to win, you don't do calculations about how many civilians might die in any given attack. You attack what is necessary to attack. You destroy what is necessary to destroy. You kill whoever is necessary to kill. That is war. You're not willing to do that, stay home. Stay home. The bad guys know this. Over the weekend, Russia bombed a mall in Kharkiv. Nobody complained about it. I mean, civilians died. Nobody cared. Israel is held to a standard no other country in the world is ever held to. And it is sick. It is sick. The only thing that should guide Israel's actions in Gaza, the only moral thing that should guide Israel's actions in Gaza is to achieve victory as quickly, as swiftly as possible while minimizing the casualties of its own soldiers. That is it. And to have any other goal, to have any other parameter, is immoral, is self-sacrificial. It's placing the enemy above self. The enemy. And that's very Christian to do, but not very rational to do. All right, so that's a continuing story. It's going to develop. The world, again, is apoplectic. Who knows what will come of it? Who knows what commissions, the ICJ or the ICC, will continue to persecute Israel and to go after them and to claim Israel's illegitimacy. It's the only country in the world that's not allowed to defend itself. Right. Also in Rafah, there was a shooting today, a gun battle between Israeli soldiers and Egyptian soldiers on the border. It turns out that the Israelis were investigating a tunnel that goes under the Egyptian border. They encountered Egyptian soldiers in the tunnel. It's not clear if those Egyptian soldiers were also just protecting the tunnel, protecting the Egyptian side of the tunnel, coming to meet up with their Hamas pals. Who knows what they were doing there? I don't know. But anyway, the Egyptians opened fire, it sounds like, on the Israelis. The Israelis protected themselves all inside this tunnel. It landed up that one of the Egyptian soldiers was killed and a number of them were wounded. No Israeli soldiers was harmed. Again, under investigation, nobody knows exactly what happened, who's at fault. But it does really suggest that because now Israel occupies basically the border between Gaza and Egypt, that there are going to be many more opportunities for conflict, for misunderstanding, for bad things to happen, and this might not be the last kind of conflict between Israel and Egypt. It's hard to tell kind of what the ramifications, the broader ramifications of that are. Egypt certainly doesn't want a war with Israel, and Israel certainly doesn't want a war with Egypt. So hopefully cool heads will prevail, and they'll figure out what exactly happened and prevent it from happening in the future. And it would be nice if Egypt knows that these tunnels exist. It would be nice if they helped Israel destroy them, rather than actually, it sounds like, protecting them and facilitating them. And because it is those tunnels is where the weapons were smuggled in. It's those tunnels that potentially could have provided an exit to Hamas leadership and to hostages. Those tunnels need to be destroyed. Hopefully that's happening. I just don't know. All right, one other story related to, I guess a couple of stories related to what is going on in Middle East. So Biden, the Biden administration is urging allies of the United States, primarily Europeans, to ease Iranian tensions, not to go too strong on Iran. Really, don't get too tough on them. This as Iran has, by all measures, significantly increased its stockpile of uranium enriched to near weapons grade level, reaching 142.1 kilograms, which is more than 30 times the limit set by the 2015 deal, that deal which, of course, Trump got out of and Biden is trying to resurrect. So while this is in allies not to do too much, not to put too much pressure on Iran, and they're asking that if there's going to be any escalation, we wait until after the presidential election. We don't want Biden to be in this pickle of having to be tough on Iran while he's trying to get reelected. Something like that. In the meantime, Iran is enriching uranium and getting to the point where it wouldn't take much for them to flip a switch and convert it into weapons grade. And given that they have the ballistic missiles, it wouldn't take much to flip a switch at that point and have a nuclear weapon. So, but don't worry, be happy, because the Biden administration is on the case, and everything will be hunky-dory. Will be fine. Will be really great. It really is pretty amazing. Of course, somebody has to deal with this uranium enrichment, and I don't think Israel's too busy. It appears, and it had an opportunity, didn't it? A few weeks ago, I called for a retaliation for the Iranian strike on Israel. The complete destruction of the nuclear facilities in Iran. Israel chose to do something symbolic, a stealth attack on some land to some air defense systems. That was the response. 300 missiles were lobbed and drones were lobbed in the direction of Israel, and they shot, 2 missiles and destroyed a defense system. What do you say? What do you say about the weakness that projects? What do you say about the weakness Biden projects when he tells the Europeans to lay off? Germany today was thinking about, they're considering declaring the Revolutionary Guard, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, to be a terrorist organization, which would have all kinds of ramifications in terms of sanctions. And it sounds like the Biden administration says, don't overdo it. Be calm until after the elections, whatever the hell that means. Hard to understand the world in which we live. It's a world of, sellouts left and right. Well, talk about a world I don't understand. This weekend was the Libertarian Party's national convention. And, it's where they elect their candidate for president of the United States for this year's presidents. They had their convention before Democrats and Republicans. And surprisingly, shockingly for many people, they invited both RFK and Donald Trump and Biden to present to the convention. RFK presented and was actually, considered running as a libertarian because he wants a registration in all states, and of course, why not? He's a libertarian. He's anti-vax, that automatically, and he's anti-lockdowns, that automatically makes him a libertarian. And Donald Trump, Joe Biden said no. He didn't come to the convention, and Trump said yes. Trump came to try to get the libertarians to vote for him because there are a lot of libertarians who are huge Trump fans. They love Trump. Indeed, the Libertarian Party, inspired by the so-called Mises Caucus, has become anti-immigration, pro-nationalism. They're anarchists who are anti-immigration, pro-nationalist, and love Trump. Now I don't get that. I don't get that combination. Don't understand it. But basically, why I'm not surprised. It is a Libertarian Party after all. It's a big tent. It will accept anybody who's, as long as they're somewhat irrational, they're in. And the more irrational you are, the more prominent you become. And certainly the Mises Caucus is about as irrational a combination of views as you could come up with. The only thing it seems like the Libertarian Party agrees on as a party is that they hate Israel and they want to stop all U.S. involvement overseas, and they don't want to support Ukraine. They don't want to support Israel. They want a completely pacifist foreign policy, or at least a foreign policy that pretends to be just focused on America, but they hate all our allies, and they blame America for every problem in the world. That is the one thing they all agree on, and it is a little worrisome that Donald Trump said he agreed with them on that in a sense. He said his vision of America First foreign policy aligns to some extent, at least, with all of this, and he doesn't want to support, certainly not Ukraine, and it's not clear what his attitude towards Israel would be in a second term. Anyway, Donald Trump came, RFK came, and he spoke, but then Donald Trump spoke. I think RFK spoke on Friday and Trump spoke on Saturday. And what was fascinating about Trump's speech was he was being booed, constantly jeered and booed, and people were yelling at him, and there was a certain section of the audience that really liked him, and they were cheering everything, and they were all excited, and they were very supportive of Trump. But the overwhelming majority of the audience was booing him and jeering him. And right, it looks like somebody's at my door. 1 second.
Hi, sorry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can I check the rebar?
Can we do it later? Another time? Thanks. All right, I forgot to put the privacy bar on, and you probably heard that whole conversation because I didn't mute my mic. All right, so anyway, he was jeered, he was booed, it was quite funny. And really, the main reason they booed him and jeered him and complained about him was because what? What would the Libertarians not like about Trump? Well, because of the vaccine. I mean, that was the main thing. They didn't like the vaccine. And of course, the lockups and his whole response to COVID, not his complete incompetence around COVID, not his burying his head in the sand in COVID, not anything like that, and not the one good thing he did during COVID, which actually spurred the development of vaccines. No, it was the development of the vaccines that they don't like. But they didn't like a lot of his things. Some of them maybe still remember the tariffs are a bad thing, so maybe didn't like that either. Yeah, Trump was booed. It was fun to watch. There's video on it. You can go find it. He said he was a libertarian at heart. He said that now that the government has prosecuted him, he's become more of a libertarian. He said he would appoint him libertarian to the cabinet. He went out. I don't think he said anything about what libertarianism actually means to him, other than the foreign policy stuff. Yeah, he tried. I mean, Mike Lee, who in the past, a long time ago, pre-Trump, was kind of a free market Republican, when he asked people to support Trump at the end of his opening remarks, he was again met with a round of boos. So this turned out to be not a friendly place for Donald Trump. And the Libertarians nominated some other guy who I'd never heard of, whose main plank, whose main thing is anti-war. His main thing is anti-war. As compared to people like me who are pro-war, right? Anti-war. So which is ridiculous, right? Everybody's anti-war. Who's not anti-war? But what it is ultimately is anti-self-defense, anti-moral judgment, anti-identifying good guys versus bad guys. It's abrogation of a president who's anti-war, like they are pacifists, basically, is a completely what's abrogation of responsibility as president. Presidents ultimately on presidents ultimately. The main thing that they do is foreign policy. Ian said the Mises caucus candidate lost. So Dave Smith is throwing a fit. I'm happy. That's great. I'm happy to hear that Dave Smith is throwing a fit. It sounds like a just thing for him. I don't know who the Mises candidate was. I don't follow libertarian politics. So, yeah. All right, let's see. So, I think that's all the news I'm going to do today. I am going to shift now because I don't want, this show is not going to be, we're not going to do a very long show today, partially because I do want to, I do have to prepare for tomorrow and still eat dinner tonight. Let's see how we're doing. All right. I will remind you that the show is supported by listeners like you. The show cannot exist without your support. So thank you to all the supporters. You can support the show as a monthly contributor on Patreon or on yaronbrookshow.com/membership, which is basically PayPal. And of course, if you're watching live, you can support the show by using the super chat or doing a sticker, and just showing your value for value, the support for what I am doing. Yes, this is all. Colt Savage. Haven't seen Colt in a long time, but he just did a sticker. Thank you, Colt. Really appreciate that. Dave Smith is a comedian, a well-known libertarian, a leader of the caucus, of the Mises caucus, an anarchist, a hater of Israel, pro-Hamas, you could argue, a pro-Hamas libertarian. Anyway, somebody, but he's a stand-up comedian and a commentator, and he's pretty bad. He's pretty bad. Anarchist, the whole package. All right. Let's see. Mises caucus candidate was a guy named Michael Restenwald, who also flailed in his response to Trump's speech due to taking a gummy given to him before the speech. Yeah, it was a gummy laced with marijuana, so he was high when he responded to Trump. This is the Libertarian National Convention. This is the convention, right? Half the people there are high on marijuana or stronger stuff, but even the presidential candidates are high and on marijuana or maybe stronger stuff. So he was clearly he was clearly high when he responded to Trump and lost. So justice plays out all around, and it's a Libertarian Party. It's a joke. It always has been a joke since it was founded by Murray Rothbard. It's been a joke, and this year it's a joke on steroids. Once in a while they've had reasonable candidates, people who are reasonable, but then they even the reasonable candidates tend to then compromise and be boring and be middle of the road and not be radical. And the other candidates, they elect candidates that are reasonable and therefore boring, or candidates that are crazy and insane. To actually be a rationally radical pro-freedom candidate, that is not possible within the Libertarian Party. Not possible. All right, anyway, they agree on one thing. They want Israel out. They want Russia to win. They want Hamas to win, and they want America to have nothing to do with any of it. All right, last time we talked about. Well, let me do the couple of super chat questions, and then I'll go to the money. We don't have any super chat questions. We have basically two, so we'll do these. And then we'll go and talk about money, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask more questions while I'm talking about money and other wonderful things like that. All right. So John says, but I keep cruising. This is lyrics. But I keep cruising, can't stop, won't stop moving. It's like I got this music in my mind saying it's going to be all right. These are lyrics to Taylor Swift's song Shake It Off, where she addresses personal attacks on her and how they can't ever break her. I think the music in her mind is self-esteem. Her real-world achievements in music are directly connected to this, and it's what allows any suffering she might feel to only go so deep. I think it's clever lyrics because music is her actual career, so it makes sense that the music in her mind repels the irrational personal attacks. This reminds me of Rourke in The Fountainhead. I just got to the part where Tui sprung his trap on Rourke with the temple. Rourke's music in his mind, where he gained self-esteem, would be architectural achievements. Do you like Taylor Swift? Would you like to review a song or two from her? I don't want to add to your plate just now. I'll probably wait till you're caught up with the reviews before I request them. Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. I'm way behind on reviews. Do I like Taylor Swift? I don't think so. I mean, I can't say I'm particularly familiar with her, but I find her music, like almost all music today, to be just boring. I just don't find it interesting. I find it repetitive, cliched, similar to other stuff, not particularly unique. I just don't. Now, I respect and admire Taylor Swift for her incredible success. I mean, she's obviously, wow. I mean, she dominates. So within this world of pop, which I am not familiar with and not particularly interested in, she dominates. And you can't dominate unless you've mastered whatever it is that this field requires. And she has mastered pop music. She has mastered pop music from the music perspective. She's mastered it from the performance perspective. She's mastered it from the, I don't know, the cool girl singer perspective, from the PR perspective, if you will, the marketing perspective. She is mastered. She is king of the hill. And I admire her and respect her as I admire and respect anybody who is a success in this world. I don't take any of it, if you will, for granted, right? So I have a lot of admiration and respect for Taylor Swift, but I don't particularly like the music or find it appealing. I wouldn't mind reviewing her songs. Maybe if I got more familiar with them, I'd find some value there. She has a great voice. I mean, she has a good voice for pop. She has a really good voice. Again, she has a stage presence. Anybody who the Republicans think is an agent of the Pentagon sent to undermine Donald Trump and undermine the MAGA agenda is a hero in my book. So I admire her for gaining the status of having a whole conspiracy theory built around her success. That is awesome. That is hard to do, and I count it as a great achievement to get MAGA conspiracy theory people all riled up and upset and motivated. So but beyond that, I'd have to listen more closely to her. The lyrics are clever, but but they're not. There's no depth there in my mind. Saying it's like I got this music. On the one hand, that's where self-esteem comes from. But it's also she's a musician, so she's She's anchored to what she's good at. She's anchored to what she believes in. She's anchored to what she does, who she is. So that's good, but it's not particularly deep, I don't think. Compare it to some of the lyrics Jennifer shared with us from I forgot his name. Sorry, Jennifer. From Rush. I mean, those are deep lyrics that are conveying a deep philosophical message and a significant Neil Peart, of course. This is good. It's positive. It's right, but it's just not very deep. Anyway, happy to review a song when the time is right. Andrew, a way to memorialize dead soldiers would be to prevent future dead soldiers through a rational, selfish foreign policy. Please comment on some element of what such a policy would be like. I mean, yes, I agree with you completely. That is the ultimate, absolutely is, America's in a situation where there shouldn't be very many dead soldiers. I'll give you a counterexample. I should have brought this up during the news items. So the United States built a floating pier off the coast of Gaza and built a kind of causeway from there onto the beach so the trucks could bring aid, and they could bring aid through ships, and no American soldiers would step foot on Gaza. They'd only be on the pier out there that is floating, which is purely sacrificial, purely the opposite of a proper foreign policy. And the funny thing about this is, sad, is there have now been at least 2 accidents on this pier that have landed American soldiers in hospital. There was a storm the other day, and as a consequence of the storm, I guess 2 rafts, buoys, something connected to the pier, drifted off. They drifted onto the beach in Israel near Ashkelon. It's just a story of complete and utter incompetence that has led to the completely avoidable injury, and one of them, from what I hear, was serious injury, to an American soldier who has a family somewhere. And what is this for? What is this for? Who is he fighting for? For aid to the enemy. So what would a proper foreign policy be? The exact opposite. It would be an assertion from the United States that from now on, the United States will only fight in its own self-interest, the protection of the individual rights and the property of Americans. It would live up to its treaties, but it would be reevaluating all those treaties based on a new standard. And the standard is the individual rights, the protection of those individual rights of American property and American individuals. It would mean that America would declare Iran a threat to the United States because of its perceived work on a nuclear weapon, and it would destroy all the work. It would destroy immediately, within 24 hours, destroy, B-52 bunker-busting bomb, and if necessary, nukes, in order to completely and utterly destroy the capability of Iran to develop nuclear weapons, to refine uranium. The centrifuges should be dust. All of that should be gone. It should be eliminated. It should disappear. And then the Iranians could maybe get an ultimatum of a certain number of hours to stand down or feel the full wrath of the American military against the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And you know what? It might not be bad just to throw that in there as a military operation, as an Air Force, crush them. I would pull all the U.S. troops that are today in Iraq and in Syria and in Jordan, pull them home. They don't need to be there. There's nothing they're protecting that needs to be protected. That cannot be done through the projection of force from afar. We do not have to put boots on the ground. We do not have to put the lives of these kids in danger. Get American troops out of the Middle East. They don't need to be there. If the Saudis need protection, send them the weapons. send them the weapons, send them instruction manuals, and they can take care of itself. They've already got some of the most advanced airplanes in the world. I think they have F-35s. You know, the United States and Israel together can send them some air defense systems. But basically, U.S. troops need to be out of that area. Israel can take care of itself, particularly if American foreign policy stops hamstringing it, stops restraining it, and the United States can take care of Iran, and other than that, get out of there. I would say, at least for now, I would allow Ukraine access to any weapon system they want, cut some kind of long-term loan deal with the Ukrainians to buy any weapon system they want, short maybe of nukes, and unleash the Ukrainians on the Russians so they can push them back to their border. And yeah, I mean, what else? These days I would invest heavily in a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, and you will stand to protect Taiwan, primarily at this point because of the chip industry in Taiwan, but potentially, and that could change in the future. You would be willing to supply American allies like Japan and South Korea with whatever weapon systems they deem necessary to protect themselves from China, and you would basically start encouraging the South Koreans and the Japanese to start building a fleet to protect themselves, or even to build some of the ships that America could use to protect itself, and bring the troops home. I think they're in 120 countries right now. Probably can bring them home from 100 of those 120, and then sit down and really think about, should the United States be a member of NATO? Should the United States have a treaty with Taiwan? Should it have a treaty with Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan? Should there be a Pacific NATO? Should the United States be part of that? I mean, there's a lot of those kind of tricky questions. What do you do about China? How do you bring China to heel? I don't think it's that hard. I think we just need to show that we're tough in the world, and China will stop the nonsense that it's doing, like what they surrounded Taiwan, and they flexed their muscles this last weekend. They wouldn't do that if America was really tough. So those are the kind of things that would embody a proper foreign policy. At the same time, the United States should drop tariffs to zero. That's also an important foreign policy. And say, we are happy to deal with anybody on the basis of trade, but if you're going to threaten us, if you're going to use force, if you're going to suggest the use of force, beware, we will crush you. That's it. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Simple foreign policy. I'm sure more to be discussed in the future regarding that. God, it's getting late, and we still have to do the money, and all right, and you guys still have to contribute on the super chat. John, thank you for reading all that. Yes, I agree her lyrics are not very deep. It's probably the closest thing I see to an actual positive message in today's pop music. Everyone is so focused on negatives, but none ever have a solution. I admire her too. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, pop music, at least the most serious pop music, has always been a downer. It's always been a little dark, a little malevolent. In the 80s, there was some, and in the 60s and 70s, in the 60s certainly, there was some more positive, upbeat pop music. But yes, pop music by definition is shallow. It appeals to a low common denominator. It's very popular, which means it can be super sophisticated, because then it won't resonate with people. Raphael, hi Yaron. What does Howard Rourke's decision to work in the quarry mean to you? Do you think making such a choice would be practical in today's world? Yeah. What it means to me is a man with integrity, a man who's not willing to give up his standards, is not willing to give up his values for money. And I think yes, absolutely. These are the kind of decisions that we face potentially every day. I mean, if the socialists of America called me tomorrow and say, hey, we'll pay $100,000 for a talk, but we like the way you defend capitalism, would you consider maybe doing one talk where you defend socialism? I'd say no matter how much money they offered me, right? So, and you can think of lots of smaller examples or medium-like examples of exactly that. I've said no to debates. Dave Smith wanted to debate me in Israel. I said no. It would have got me a huge amount of, a lot of people would have seen it. Dave is very popular. He's huge. I mean, he's horrible, but he's huge, right? So it is, of course, it's a choice that's practical in the world today, and it's a choice you're going to face in whatever you do in life. To what extent, how much are you willing to compromise your values? Or will you stick to what you believe in and live by that even if it costs you money? Yeah, Phil said, I've heard someone offered Rand $1 million to include religion into objectivism. Yes, somebody did. Some Texas rich guy. And she said no. So, but that's not a hard no. I mean, that's for easy for her to do. And, you know, I would absolutely say no. So I think there are lots of opportunities where this will come up. Colt says, one of my friends was telling me that there is a North Carolina citizen that is held hostage by Hamas. And the fact that we do nothing is despicable. Yes, I mean, partially he's probably, I don't know, but he's probably a dual citizen. He's probably also an Israeli citizen, so a lot of Americans go, well, yeah, but he's a... But that's the point, right? That's the point. The point is that, that we do not have a foreign policy aimed at, focused on, centered around protecting the individual rights of Americans. We have a foreign policy that is motivated by and geared towards self-sacrifice. And you can't do anything to save this one guy. I mean, 35 civilians might die. I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show, but I mentioned that. 35 civilians were killed yesterday. 35 civilians might die, so we can't do anything about him. Too bad he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just tough luck. And the government just walks away. But that's our government. And that's our government no matter who's president. All right, so let's, again, I'll remind you quickly, this show is a listener-supported show. It survives through contributions of people like you, either doing it monthly through Patreon or yaronbrookshow.com/membership, which is PayPal, or you can become a member here on YouTube, or you can use the Super Chat here to either make a sticker, which is just a contribution, or ask a question with a contribution. But either way, that is the way to support the show and support what I do, and to be a trader, value for value. So please, those of you who are not live, please consider becoming monthly contributors. All right, so last time we talked about what fiat money is. We discussed the origins of money, where money comes from, and the experiments of fiat money going back to John Law in France in the 18th century, and then of course the big what do you call it? God, I was distracted by a super chat, so let me just address this. Edward says, also Dave Smith debate was not encouraging Yaron to compromise his values, it was encouraging him to argue in favor of his values against Dave Smith. Yeah, but Dave Smith is the kind of human being I will not debate. It would be me compromising my values to debate him. That would be me compromising my values, and that's what I will not do. There's certain people, and I've said this over and over again, there's certain people that I will not debate, and I've often given you partial lists of that. All right, so we talked about the experiments in fiat money. We talked about the experiment in fiat money in the United States. It's been going on really since 1933, but the experiment has really exploded since we went completely off the gold standard under Bretton Woods in 1971, and we have talked about that. What really fiat money makes possible is the complete control of the Federal Reserve over the money supply and over interest rates. The Federal Reserve gets to determine those interest rates, gets to determine the quantity of money that exists in the system and how it's allocated. And by doing so, the Federal Reserve distorts markets, creates massive distortions. In my view, has caused crises and caused bubbles, and bubbles have burst. And to a large extent, it was the Federal Reserve causing the Federal Reserve through a restrained fiat money system caused the Great Depression. It then sustained the Great Depression, but it also caused the inflation of the 1970s. It caused the S&L crisis. It caused the great financial crisis, the great recession in 2008. This is what fiat money brings about, because it brings about central planning to the determination of interest rates. It brings about central planning to the determination of the quantity of money. These things now are not determined by supply and demand. There's no anchor to how much money other than some equation on some computer of some economist, PhD in economics at the Federal Reserve. And if you read the economics literature on money and on interest, they don't know anything, and nobody agrees with anybody. I mean, there's real conflict and disagreement about what it all means and how you would do it, and they don't know. So the idea that some economics PhD in some office at the Federal Reserve has the model to determine interest rates and to determine quantity of money and determine how it all works and what's the right combination to make it all work is ludicrous. Central planning doesn't work. It doesn't work on anything. There's no equation that determines how much food you should produce in an economy and where it should be distributed and where it should go. We let markets determine that. And that's exactly what should happen with money. Money should be determined by the marketplace. Interest rates should be determined by the marketplace. Okay, so now I have a series of questions that David has relating to different issues that have to do with money and investment. More than that. So the first question he has after we talked about fiat money is, how is wealth created? And wealth is created by the production of values. Wealth is created by whenever you produce something that is of value to someone else, and that he values it more than the cost of producing it, wealth has been created. If that sounds like a lot like profit, profit is the creation of wealth. It could be a product, it could be a service that somebody values at a higher price than you are providing it for, than it costs you to provide it. You've created wealth. You've created something that didn't exist before. You've given a value to somebody else that's a net gain in the world. There's something more than there was before. Every time, there's a sense in which every time we trade, we create wealth, right? We exchange money for something of greater value to us. The other side, that profit is a part of that wealth, but it's also true that me having an iPhone that's worth a lot more than the $1,000 I paid for it is wealth. I'm richer for it. My life, in a meaningful way, my life is better. Even though I have less money, my life is better. I have more wealth. So wealth is created by the production of value, by the creation of value. And you can measure that by the stuff that people trade and the intensity and scale of that trade. and the total value of the profits that exist out there in the world. So wealth is not created, wealth created is in the products and services that are being provided, right? And you can benefit from other people creating wealth. So for example, you buy a stock, say you buy Apple stock. Apple is the one creating the wealth, but you, because you're now a partial owner of Apple, if the stock goes up, your wealth is increased because you are participating, you have a piece of the wealth that Apple is creating. So you're not creating wealth in and of itself. The trading in stock is not creating wealth, but the underlying entity, the entity in which you are buying the stock, is creating wealth, and you're benefiting from it. So that's how wealth is created. Hopefully that answers. Can you steelman Keynes? It's, that's a big question, and Keynes wrote a lot of different things, and he's a very extensive economist who's articulated things about a lot of areas. So let me try to steelman his argument regarding the need for fiat money and the need to smooth out the business cycle. So, we all know, and certainly this is true of free markets, that there is a business cycle. There are periods in which the economy grows fast, and then there are periods in which it slows down or might even contract. And a lot of that contraction has to do with the fact that some of the investment when the economy is growing fast are just not going to be good investments. People are going to make mistakes. People are going to get super excited about a particular area like railroads or internet or whatever, and going to overdo it. And as a consequence, they might be just realignment. These companies will have to go bankrupt, capital be redeployed to more profitable opportunities, and a lot of time this cycle is very, very, very healthy because it is a process by which we cleanse the markets of failure. We cleanse the market of things that don't work. We cleanse the market of things that are deploying capital, not in wealth-creating activities, but in wealth-destroying activities. So, a free marketer would consider the process of, for example, a recession as something that, if it's in a free market, is often necessary. Now, there's a question of whether in a truly free market, how often there would actually be recessions. That is, the only real explanation for a recession in a truly free market is either people are gone completely irrational and invested irrationally in something, and it's so bad and so many people and so much capital that it is causing the entire economy to be penalized. So that could be one reason why there's a recession, the irrationality of people. But the whole basis of free markets and capitalism is the assumption that people are fundamentally rational. Certainly not everybody, not all the time, but certainly most, in significant ways, and certainly we're all capable of rationality. So to assume that everybody's irrational is just a bad assumption. It's just not true, and certainly not in a free market. That free market, one of the beauties of a market is it rewards rationality and penalizes irrationality. That is, irrational people lose money, so they become less and less influential in the marketplace. So, would there be recessions in a free market? I think the answer is probably yes, when there was a major disruptive technology introduced, and that had enough of an effect on several industries to drive, at least in the short run, economic activity to a halt. So a technology that just shifted, that required layoffs and shutting down of several industries and a redeployment of capital based on this new technology. So ultimately it would lead to great economic growth, but in the short run could lead to retraction. Keynes argues that recessions are caused fundamentally by, in a sense, a decline in aggregate demand. That is, people stop buying stuff. And when people stop buying stuff, companies close, companies don't invest, everything shuts down. That it's the demand side that is driving the business cycle. And people might stop buying stuff. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They might feel afraid that things are going bad in the economy, and they might slow down their purchases. Well, they slow down their purchases might lead employers to start laying people off. Now people are laid off. Now they don't have money to buy stuff. So there's even a greater shrinkage of demand, of buying. And as a consequence of that, more people are laid off. Businesses start shutting down factories, be shrinking supply. And that just spirals and spirals and spirals and spirals and can get really, really bad. And that's how you get depressions, Keynes would argue. And you can imagine some validity to that. So there's a sense in which it's psychological, or at least it gets started and becomes psychological. So you can imagine that happening. It's hard to imagine what would trigger that, what would get that going, what would have to happen, what would have to happen. But yeah, I mean, it's not completely crazy, other than the fact that it's weird. Sorry. Right. Just checking stuff out here. Right. So Keynes would probably would argue that was what caused, and then what you want is, and this could be caused, for example, because gold was leaving the country because it's against the gold standard. Because there is, when would gold leave the country? When you're importing a lot, right? You're buying a lot of stuff from overseas, more than they're buying from you, then you need to pay for it, and the way you pay for it is to ship gold overseas. Less gold in the United States means there's less money here. Prices go down, which might cause people to be afraid of losing their jobs, businessmen to be afraid of a shrinking in demand that then has the spiraling effect. Now, again, I don't think any of that is right. It's all based on the psychology of fear, which I think is fundamentally wrong. Now, what does Keynes suggest? What he suggests is, well, if you have fiat money, you still might have these spiraling, but then what you can do is the government can deficit spend during a time where things are getting worse and businesses are worried and people are losing their jobs and therefore not spending and therefore more businesses are worrying. Instead of that, what you could do is the government could just print a bunch of money and give it to people. And then if you give people money, then that would stimulate demand. They would then go buy stuff with that stuff. And then businessmen would see, oh, people are buying stuff again. And then they would start ramping up production. And they would start hiring people. And that's how you get out of a recession, right? You hand the money. You stimulate it by pumping money into the economy, either with the government deficit spending, either by borrowing the money. So the idea is if the money is just sitting there, it's being hoarded by people, it's not being invested, so the government takes it, it invests it in a sense by just giving it to people to go spend. So Keynes's focus is on aggregate demand, and aggregate demand is easy to fix. You just give people a bunch of money. This is exactly what happened during COVID. Aggregate demand collapsed, and this created a real economic problems during COVID. And what the Trump administration did, and what the Biden administration followed up even bigger, was basically print money and hand it out to people, and people went out to spend it, and the economy bounced back. It actually worked, right? Of course, it also created a bunch of inflation, which we're suffering from, have been suffering from since. But there's a sense in which, because the shock was an exogenous shock, you got this government shutdowns basically, and people rationally stopped buying stuff, also because they lost their jobs and all of this. You give employers money, you give money, you remember the PPP loans, you give employers money to hire people back, you give people, individuals, money to go buy at the shops, and suddenly economic activity goes up. It recreates, and it looks like it works. Only if you ignore the consequences. And the consequences are inflation, the consequences are bad investments, the consequences are that COVID is unique because the recession didn't happen because some companies needed to go bankrupt. But other recessions, like in 2008, we didn't let them play out. We didn't let enough banks go bankrupt. We didn't let enough other firms go bust. We didn't allow for the redistribution of capital based on this new information, the shock to the system that was the financial crisis. We didn't allow that healthy process. Instead, we just threw money at the problem, got ourselves out of it, and the consequence after the great financial crisis was stagnation. And in a sense, setting ourselves up for the kind of world in which we live today, both inflation and stagnation and bad investments all around. Even though, again, if you just look at the stock market, you'd say, oh no, things are fantastic. Things are great. Because a lot of the money that's being printed, a lot of the money that people borrowed has gone into the stock market, and it indeed is booming. Whether that boom is reflected of real reality, whatever that is, because we live with the reality that we have, whether it's reflective of other factors, and whether and how this will all play out in the years to come is hard to tell. But Keynes, kind of in the middle of a depression, Keynes is reassuring, because what he says is, if we just get governments to spend a lot of money, they will create economic activity that will get us out of recession, and then everything will be fine. And the reality is that is the policies that FDR embraced during the Great Depression, and it never got us out of the Great Depression. Never got us out of the Great Depression. Great Depression ended in 1945 when the war was over. So, and a lot of the New Deal stuff was put aside, and the soldiers came back home, and everybody started to produce, and everybody back to work, and everybody started to create and build and make. So it doesn't work, and it's not, it approaches the whole issue of the economy from the wrong perspective. Instead of thinking about production, creation, business, that's the driver. That's what drives the economy. It's not, what drives the economy is not consumption. What drives the economy is production. And of course, as I've said many times, you cannot consume until you produce. You cannot consume until you produce. And you've got to work in order to buy stuff, and the stuff you buy has to be produced by somebody. So you have to produce in order to buy, and the stuff that so there's at least 2 acts of production for every act of consumption, although there's a lot more if you think about the whole supply chain. But, production is what is essential in economics. Production is what you need to think about. If you want to think about how to, about the business cycle, you have to think about it in terms of the producer, and think about the fact that a business cycle is good in a sense that is a recession. A downturn is good in a sense that it reallocates resources to the better producers, and it gets rid of the noise, the thing holding back the economy, which are the bad producers. All right, he's asking a quick evaluation of the following investment vehicles. Just a reminder, we have to fund these shows, so a reminder to use the super chat, to do Stephen Hopper, Jack, thank you. Kim, thank you. You guys have all done stickers. It's great. Gail, thank you. There are probably others that I haven't gotten. Colt Savage did one early on. Jonathan started us all off with some. So please consider doing a sticker. We've got 90 people or so watching right now. If everybody did some stickers, we could get closer to the target. And those of you who have questions, feel free to ask them and use the super chat to do so. All right, a quick evaluation of the following investment vehicles. Precious metals. Precious metals, particularly gold and silver, have been viewed primarily as hedges against inflation. Gold is up a lot, probably because it is a hedge against inflation, and people have bought it in anticipation of inflation. To the extent that you think inflation is going to continue, which I think it will, then precious metals, having a portion of your portfolio in precious metals is probably a good deal. It's an inflation hedge. You're not going to make a lot of money of it because it's not a productive asset. It's just money as it sits there. It's not something that's creating wealth, if you will. It's just protecting your downside from the risk of greater inflation. I'm not an expert on gold and silver, so I don't know where we are exactly, and in terms of the evaluations relative to everything else. But I don't consider them a productive asset. They don't constitute a big portion of my portfolio. They are primarily hedges against any kind of inflation in the marketplace. Stocks, equities. Stocks and equities are productive. You're investing in the productive activity in the economy. By buying them, what you're basically suggesting is that you think the economy is going to, that American companies, if it's the American stock market, are going to continue to do well, that profits into the future are going to go well. You don't expect interest rates to go through the roof or because of inflation, or if you do, you expect the companies to be able to mitigate that by raising prices, which is usually true. Stocks don't do badly during inflation. They don't do great, but they don't do badly during inflation. They hold their own. They don't collapse. They don't go down a lot. Stocks are a good investment generally, and have been over the long run forever. In the short run, they can be really bad. American stocks are, I'd say, relatively expensive. They've been on a run for a long, long time. The American stock market has been going up since the great financial crisis, really. Since 2009, so I think, was it March or April 2009, they've been going up almost nonstop. And one wonders if the performance of the underlying economy justifies that, and whether projecting into the future it justifies not. Now we have to remember, the stock market is not just any companies. The stock market tends to be the best companies, the most successful companies, the highest growth companies. So I have most of my savings in stocks because over the long run they do well. What is going to be the future of stocks here? I'm worried. I worry because I don't know what happens from now on to interest rates. I think a lot of the stocks right now are priced as if interest rates are going to go down. A lot of the stocks are priced as if inflation is going to be kept under control, is going to come down from here, and therefore interest rates will go down. If inflation picks up, stock prices will go down. Like stocks over the long run with inflation do okay, but right now they're priced as if inflation is coming down. And if inflation lands up coming up, then stocks will come down. So I'm worried about stocks. I also worry about the slow collapse of globalization and the pain that will cause to large multinational corporations who are the big businesses in America, the pain that causes to American consumers and American businesses. So I'm worried about the future of production. I'm worried about the future and I'm worried about inflation. And if you combine those stocks, there's a big question mark on stocks in spite of the fact. But, I've always had big question mark on stuff, and they always outperform. So I'd rather just buy and hold and just hang in there over the very long run. And that has proved to be, I think, the best strategy with regard to investment is I think if you, over the last, certainly since 1980, if you'd, 82, if you basically bought stocks and held them, you've done phenomenally well with all the ups and downs and all the crashes and everything. You do phenomenally well. Index funds, ETFs. Index funds are just a cheap, easy way, so are ETFs, to buy stocks. It's my preferred way. Index funds are great. You can buy an index of the S&P 500. You can buy an index of the 2,000 stocks in the market. So you get exposure to the entire market, not to any particular segment of it, but to the entire market. You can combine index funds. You can buy an American index fund, and you can buy some European stocks to an index fund, and you can buy some Asian stocks or some emerging market stocks. You can buy. And I think I bought recently. I think I bought it. I need to check that it actually got executed. Some Argentina, a Milei ETF, right? An ETF of stocks in Argentina, so I have some exposure to Argentina, just in case Milei does really, really well and the stocks do better than they've already done. So things like that. So index funds, ETFs, are a very cheap way of buying broad stocks. This is how you should do most of your investment. Generally, 99.9% of people are not good investors when it comes to individual stocks. Don't try it. Don't do it. Day traders lose money, almost all of them. Some of them don't, but that's mostly luck. It's just like some gamblers make money, but most people lose. The professionals make money on stock trading, and those of us who are not professionals should stay out of it. So index funds are the ways to invest. You buy it, you forget about it, you don't think about it until you actually need the money. Bonds and T-bills, probably not a good time to buy bonds. Well, hard to tell with bonds, right? So it depends what you believe is going to happen with inflation. If you believe inflation is going to still increase or stay where it is right now, well, then it's not a good time to buy bonds. The value of bonds will go down as inflation goes up. If you think that inflation is basically going down, that it's heading towards the Fed's 2% target, then it's a great time to buy bonds. You're going to make money on those bonds. As inflation goes down, bond prices go up. You make money on bonds. T-bills are very short-term bond-like securities. They are a great way to put money in where you're not taking any risk, because they're government bonds, so they're not going to default. You're not taking any risk, and they're very short-term, so you're not taking any interest rate risk, really, because they're constantly repricing. And so it's where you put your liquid money. If you buy a money market, you're basically buying an instrument that's buying a lot of T-bills and similar instruments. So short-term, with no real risk associated with it. Wes, thank you for the support. Really, really appreciate the support of the show. All right, let's see, where are we? Let me just press that button. Yep. All right, real estate. God, you're asking me questions that are beyond my scope of expertise. I still think commercial real estate is probably still problematic. I don't know if we've seen the bottom for commercial real estate. Maybe we have, but I doubt it. With interest rates relatively high and vacancies relatively high, I just don't see how commercial real estate, office buildings, for example, don't take a huge loss. We've already seen some pretty incredibly downward pressure on commercial real estate. I just don't think it's over. I don't think it's bad enough so that now's the opportunity to buy. It might be in a year from now. It might be bad enough. It might be so horrible in commercial real estate that it's time to come in and start buying stuff. But so far, I'm not sure that it is. And then when it comes to residential home prices are really high, which is partially because of money and interest rates historically being low. But I think they're still high in spite of interest rates being high because demand and supply are completely out of whack. That is, post-financial crisis, we've built very few homes in America relative to demand. So I think with housing, it's primarily a supply issue. I don't think the supply issue gets fixed very quickly. It's going to take years before we can fix the supply issue, many years. And in some areas, it won't be fixed. And as a consequence, I would say stay away. Residential homes will probably still go up in price, particularly if interest rates come down. But even with higher interest rates, I think an interesting play is rents. Rental properties are probably going to do very, very well. So even if home prices stabilize, rents are still going to produce really good returns. Because of the supply demand, there's just not enough housing in America. Arts, I don't understand the art market in terms of an investment. Crappy art, so-called art, stuff that's not even art, stuff that's just junk, sells for hundreds of millions of dollars, and masterpieces sell for 10,000 or something. The art world is completely divorced from reality, from aesthetic value, from the aesthetic value of a piece. The art world is 100% driven by second-handedness, by what is hot, what is cool, what do other people say is good, what are the art critics influenced by modern philosophy argue is good. Art is not connected to this world in my view. So I can't make a recommendation because I would never buy a Pollock. I would never recommend you buy a Pollock, but if you'd bought a Pollock in spite of my advice 20 years ago, you would have made a fortune. So it's a market that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why Pollock is worth more than the paper on which, or the cloth or whatever it is that it's painted on. It's worthless junk. Modern art generally is worthless junk, and yet the markets place a huge value in it. Okay, crypto. Crypto's complicated. And look, I'm more favorable to crypto today than I have been maybe ever. Generally, I think crypto is an interesting technology, a fascinating technology, which has multiple applications and uses that we still don't know, and that because of regulations and controls, we're not able to see the full flourishing of what crypto makes possible. Now, let me just say, I think the primary thing that crypto does is it provides us with tools to get around the regulatory environment in which we live. And that's true of, it allows us to get around the irrationality of central bank fiat money. And it allows us to get around the unbelievably difficult regulations of the SEC on new businesses and startups. Crypto has the potential to circumvent all of that. But of course, to do all that, it's going to have to be allowed in some way. Now, because the government can stop it, the government can throttle it. And my fear is that the government will do exactly that because it realizes that what crypto can do is, in many parts of the world, it gets around capital controls. In the United States, it gets around a bunch of different regulations. When tokens were used to raise capital for startups, which is a brilliant use of tokens, and made complete sense, the government shut it down. The SEC shut it down and didn't make it possible, and it placed all kinds of constraints on it. So I think crypto's super interesting. And it's still not clear what the killer app is going to be. It's still not clear who the losers and winners are. We know some of the losers. They've gone out of business already, but we still don't know who the winners are going to be ultimately. Coinbase seems like they position themselves well. Is it Ethereum? Is it Bitcoin? Is it both? Is it them and a bunch of other tokens? What are the tokens actually worth? You have to look at their underlying business assumptions. What are they being used for? A lot of the tokens are just fluff. A lot of crypto is just noise. It has no productive value. It's just so making sense out of the market and figuring out what everything is very challenging. I have become a little bit more sympathetic to Bitcoin in the sense that Bitcoin is a solution for people primarily stuck in outside of the West, in countries that have, there are 160 currencies in the world. How many of those 160 are stable? How many of those 160 would you want to own? Well, a lot of the people who live in the countries where those currencies are used don't want to own them. And crypto makes it possible for them to get their money out and hold something. And if there's demand by enough of them, it will drive the cost up. Blockchain, I think, is an interesting technology. And I'm starting maybe to appreciate the technology vis-a-vis money. I'm still grappling with it. I'm still trying to understand it and get full clarity on it. Because I think it is, there's something very interesting there. I don't think this is the solution to statism. I don't think this is, because I think ultimately all of this will come under government control. But it will solve certain problems and will potentially make it possible to get around regulation. The regulations that the House of Representatives passed last week probably are good for the industry in the sense that the alternative was for the SEC to regulate it, and the SEC was doing a horrible job at it. So I think the industry is probably moving in the right direction. And maybe Bitcoin is worth what they say it's worth. I just don't, I don't know. I still don't have a good grasp of it. It is going to be interesting that Ethereum is not going to be traded as well. If somebody told me they had a few percentage points of their total net worth in crypto, I would say fine. I'd say, yeah, you want to be exposed to an asset class that might go up a lot, that might be really interesting. And I think that is my attitude. ZA400 Racer sent me my first Bitcoin. Did I ever get a Bitcoin? I don't think I ever got a Bitcoin. I didn't. What did I do with it? I don't think I have it. Maybe it's sitting in some wallet somewhere that I don't know of, but I don't think I ever got a Bitcoin. What is your best estimate for inflation over the next 12 months? I don't think inflation is coming down a lot. So what is it now? 3.4, 3.5? I think it's going to stay around there. I wouldn't be shocked if it went up a little bit. That is, I think it's somewhere between 3 and 4. That would be my estimation. How do banks make money? Oh, wow. All right. So that's a big question. Banks make money basically, I mean, it's pretty simple. Banks basically borrow money from you and me. They borrow money in two ways. YBS donation. Where did you make the YBS donation of Bitcoin? On what platform? Where was it done? I mean, I'll have to ask Angela if we ever got a donation via Bitcoin. So I don't know where it went. Did I ever have a wallet? Yeah, I'll look into it. Z400 Racer. I'll check it out. So banks make money by borrowing money from you and me, right? And they borrow it in two forms. One is they borrow it by providing us with a checking account and paying us very little interest or no interest on that checking account. That checking account is, for the most part, available to us for withdrawal at any time. So it is what's called a demand deposit. I can demand it at any time and get my money. Now, when you open the bank account, you signed a document that said that the bank can, on occasion, freeze that money and not allow you to take it out. So just be aware of that. It's not completely available anytime. The bank does have some discretion about giving it back to you, even in a checking account. But anyway, so that's a very short-term liability that they take on. Then they borrow from us by providing us with saving products. So open a saving account to get 4.5%. I think I've got one of those saving accounts in a bank. And then it's locked up usually for a certain period of time. Maybe locked up for a year, maybe two. In order to get the higher interest rates, you have to lock the money up, or a CD or something like that. And then they take that money, particularly the saving account money, and they can loan that out. And they can loan that out to people who are going to return the money to the bank. Maybe they're loaning it out to people who are expanding their business, buying a new machine, investing in the latest technology. Let's say you're a doctor and you need this new fancy tool, and they'll loan you the money to buy it. They'll also loan it out. So most of their loans are to small businesses, some of it construction loans, some of it are loans to fund the purchase of commercial real estate. I want to buy an office building because I want to move my offices there. So they loan it out, and they charge interest higher on the loans than they do on the deposits and the saving accounts. So if, for example, they're paying me 4.5% on my saving account, they're charging on the loan 6, 7, 8%, right? And they're making a profit. That's the profit that they make. So they're redeploying my savings to productive activity. And then a lot of what banks do, particularly today, is they buy securities. They buy bonds. They buy government securities, usually treasuries. They buy, in a sense, money market securities. They try to find securities that'll pay them more than what they're paying you. And if it's a checking account and they're giving you, let's say, 1%, then all they need is to find somewhere where they can invest the money relatively safely and in short term that gives them more than 1%, maybe 3%. Now, this is a very, very fragile system. Banks, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, well, actually, the day after tomorrow and the day after, at the Peterson Academy, my course on finance. Banks are a very fragile industry, very fragile entity, and it's not clear they should even exist in the world in which we live in today, given fintech, given our ability to transact online, given what we are capable of doing. It's not clear that banking, in the way we have it today, makes any sense and should really exist. But the basic theory of banking, the way in which banking makes money, is they borrow money from you at short term at low rates, and they lend it out at high rates. That's basically how they function. And that creates a lot of problems, which on another show, we can just do a show on banks. I can talk for hours on that. It creates a lot of problems. Again, I'll talk about that in that course for the Peterson Academy. Is Ray Dalio MMT valid? No, MMT is complete nonsense. It is it's an anti-economics. It's not an economic theory. It's a rejection of economic theory. It's a rejection of economics. It's voodoo economics, if you will. And I'm surprised that Ray Dalio has come around to MMT. I understand the impetus. The government has huge amounts of debt. The way to get rid of that, and it's debt payments, it's debt interest payments are bankrupting this country. We can't sustain the level of debt payments. And what Ray Dalio is saying is lower interest rates to zero. The Fed should artificially lower interest rates to zero. The government should issue bonds at zero, and refinance all the debt that it's at high interest rates with these bonds at zero. And the theory is that won't have any effect. And that's ludicrous. First of all, people would have to be willing to buy bonds that yield zero. You're assuming there's no inflationary impact, but we just saw that there can be inflationary impacts of these things. Now, if you drive interest rates to zero, you know, and you basically issue bonds at zero, you're creating massive distortions, massive perversions within the banking system. And it's going to create many more problems than what you're trying to solve. Many more problems than what you're trying to solve. For example, people won't want to invest in government bonds. They'll want to invest in risky stuff, and they'll rush into risky stuff, which can create bubbles and create situations where asset prices go up and then crash. MMT is just it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that can create money out of nothing. That'll create inflation. And if you create the money and somehow suck the money out somewhere else, then you won't be able to keep interest rates at zero. So it's a real mythology that this is possible. It assumes, you know, there's a whole theory behind MMT. The assumption is that there's always excess production, that you can spend more money and get people to work and create more stuff, and that actually and therefore it never becomes inflationary. Well, again, we saw why that is not true with COVID. The government issued a lot of money, and but I do believe that this is what the government's going to try. There's no question, no matter who gets elected, certainly if Trump gets elected, there'll be enormous pressure on the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, no matter what inflation is, to lower interest rates. And there'll be, and the government will try to refinance as much of its debt at the lower interest rates in order to get off its book the huge debt burden. They'll try to mimic what they did during the early 2000s. Whether they can actually pull it off, whether they actually do it, they can probably do it, but there will be other immense real consequences. So, you know, again, I've talked in the past about MMT. You could probably do a whole show on MMT. I'd have to, we'd have to read up on the literature and really analyze it and go through the economics of it. But there's no free lunches, and MMT is trying to elicit a free lunch. Right. All right. Okay, last question, and then I'll turn to your Super Chat questions, and we'll call it a day. Do you have any thoughts on the so-called Great Reset, or is it just a bunch of BS? I did like 3 shows on the Great Reset. I mean, way back when it first came out in 2020, 2021, something like that. I mean, yeah, it's a leftist fantasy to bring the world's economy under the control of, you know, a leftist bureaucratic elite. It's kind of a socialist/fascist idea of basically bringing industry and bringing technology and bringing the world economies under the control of governments, and governments particularly oriented towards a common good, but kind of global governance perspective. I think it's BS in the sense that it will never happen, or it's not going to happen. I don't think it's BS in terms of their interest in doing it. I think they absolutely wanted it. Again, I did a show on this. You can do Great Reset, Yaron Brook, and find my analysis of the actual program that they put together, the actual suggestions that they made. They're just not going to be successful in pulling it off. There's a huge backlash against it, a huge rise in nationalism and against the idea of global governance, particularly when it comes to economics. And the United States was never going to play along. It was never going to happen. But what they wanted to do was very, very scary. All right, David, let me know if that covers it. Happy to do any kind of follow-up stuff or everything, but so let me know if I covered everything you wanted me to cover. All right, let's do, what do we have? 8 super chats, and then we'll call it a night. Rafael, follow up. I understand you turning down 100,000 on the socialism issue, but what about working in finance in Europe with ESG and government BS all over the place? I mean, you have to figure out how you're going to draw the line. I mean, you know, you probably, if you're working in Europe, ESG is everywhere. You don't have any option. You do it holding your nose. And if you ever get into a position where you can start your own fund or you can do something of substance, then you can then make a statement. But yeah, I mean, if you're an employee, ESG is not the hill on which you want to go to the query for. But there might be a hill in which you want to go to the query for. So you're going to have to decide what that hill is. But the point is, there should be a hill because you should have values. And ESG is just ubiquitous. There's just nothing that's not ESG. And unless you're willing to leave finance, but then what other professions realistic in terms of surviving and doing okay within industry, but there has to be some limit. What if, I don't know, the Nazis take over in Europe and the only jobs in finance are financing Nazi stuff? Do you stay in finance? No, at that point you probably leave. So at some point, there's some limit. You have to figure out where that is. Hopper Campbell, thank you for the $20 question. When I look around and see all the abundance of technology we have, a part of me thinks we've already won. We haven't won. I mean, enlightenment is still winning to some extent. But as the Romans discovered, it could all disappear. It can all go away. So we have to fight for this survival, the continued survival of the Enlightenment. You have to fight for it every day. Every day. Mark, have you seen the documentary Screams Before Silence by Sheryl Sandberg? It is about the abuses of women on October 7th. I haven't seen it, probably will never see it. It sounds horrible in a sense of the content, not in, and it needs to be seen. It needs to be seen by people because they don't get it. I get it, so I don't need to see it. But the evil that is Hamas, the extent of the evil that they committed, the extent that the evil that they are capable of, that needs to be, you know, that needs to become real for people. And the only way I think for it to become real for people is if they watch these kind of documentaries and they see what these animals are capable of doing. Slug 1776. What do you think of Vivaldi's Four Seasons? I mean, I love the Four Seasons. It's wonderful music. It's engaging. It's fun. It's emotionally sweeping. I mean, I don't typically like Baroque music from that era, but Vivaldi's Four Seasons is beautiful. And again, energetic and fun and evocative of the seasons. That is, you know, there are 4 pieces to it, and each representing a season. And they really do evoke that season, the emotions that are associated with that season. So it's beautiful done, and yeah, amazing. Mark, what do you think about India as an investment country? I've done well on a few India ETFs. I know they have mass inefficiencies due to regulations, but they are an alternative to China. Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, I think they're a very interesting alternative to China. There's a massive amount of wealth to be created in India. Sadly, they're so heavily regulated. It's really sad and unnecessary. Imagine if a country like India loosened up on those regulations. They have an immense skill set. They have high education rates, high quality engineers and scientists. India could flourish and boom. And I think as a long-term play, I would bet more on India than on China. The challenge with India is regulations, nationalism, a lack of infrastructure, or lack of investment in infrastructure. But it has the talent pool to be incredibly successful. And of course, the numbers. So I haven't looked at ETFs from China, from India. I don't know how they're valued. I don't know what it looks like, but I would definitely be looking at that as an investment potential. Frank, should government bail out Red Lobster? Hey, why not? No, I think it shouldn't bail out Red Lobster. Government shouldn't bail out anybody. Anybody. James Taylor says, do you ever stop to think that there are 8 billion people on the planet and maybe 40,000 objectivists, like we're living in a minor zombie apocalypse? Yes, I think about it often, about how difficult it is, how difficult what it is that we're trying to do, how difficult it is to impact the culture. Remember, we don't have to turn people into objectivists. What we need is 40,000 objectivist intellectuals, and then we'll win. But it's hard. And every time you think you're on the right path, people turn out to be not as good as you thought they were, which is sad. String a bell. Hello, Yaron. Are credit unions better than banks? I don't know. I haven't looked at a balance sheet of a credit union. My guess is probably not. Probably not. They're regulated differently, but I can't remember the exact way in which they're regulated differently. But a lot of the differences between them would be as a result of the regulation. But banks are terrible. I mean, they're a dying industry that nobody will let them die. That's the horrible thing. If we kill them off quickly, that would be a huge advancement. Michael says, would you say Golda Meir was a better prime minister than Netanyahu, more egoistic despite being a committed socialist? I think so. I think she lived her values. She wasn't quite as much of a liar, a pragmatist, a power luster. Golda Meir was not a power luster. Netanyahu is a pure power luster and a pragmatist as a consequence. So he's the worst. In Israel, at least. Harper Campbell, as a police officer in a mixed economy, do you have a moral obligation not to enforce rights-violating laws? No, I mean, as a police officer, your job is to enforce the law. You don't get to choose what are rights-violating laws and what are not. I mean, you could turn a blind eye once in a while, but that's not your job. If you're not willing to enforce the laws as they are, you shouldn't become a police officer. But it is completely wrong and anarchist, really, for you to make decisions about what laws and you take an oath as a police officer to abide by the law, not to abide by rights-respecting law, but by the law. And you need to live up to that. Mark, do you play a musical instrument? If so, what? If not, why? I do not play a musical instrument. I wish I did, but not really. Why don't I? Because my family decided that my musical skills were so pathetic. I can't sing in tune, and I had no patience. I was a very difficult child. I was what was called then hyperactive. I would have been on drugs if I was a kid today. So I think my parents decided that to battle me over practicing an instrument, to battle me to practice at all, and given my lack of musical talent, that learning to play a musical instrument was a waste of money and a waste of time. So, yeah. That is why. Liam, $50. Thank you, Liam. Really, really appreciate it. For many people, particularly objectivists, who don't strive to take risks, who don't strive and take risks, is not due to a fear of failure, but a belief that the world is so irrational and corrupt, any attempt to engage in it meaningfully will only lead to disappointment. I mean, I think if that's true, then that is unbelievably sad, and you're giving up really on life, because if you don't strive and take risks, you're not going to fully manifest. You're not going to fully experience life. You're not going to push yourself. You're not going to gain the self-esteem that you need. You're just not going to live completely. Now, it's true The potential for failure is greater because the world is so irrational. But look at how many people succeed. Look at how many people succeed because they're talented. Look at how many people succeed because they are talented. So I think for the objective is to do this. I think it's a rationalization. I think they're rationalizing their fear. They're rationalizing their lack of ambition. They're rationalizing, it's an excuse, in other words. It's not real. Because the reality is that so many people out there are successful. The objective is to be incredibly successful. Look at the guy doing Zoom. Zoom? Boom, sorry, boom, right? Boom. He's revolutionizing the airline industry, an entire industry that's been around for a century, an industry that requires massive capital investment. Everybody would have said, supersonic jets, go find something else to do. What are you doing? You're crazy. And he's doing it. Now, I don't know if he'll be successful, but even if he fails, he will know that he pushed it. He went all out. He tried. And there are people out there sitting on the sidelines saying, world is too irrational. It's just an excuse for not taking your life seriously. An excuse, for not pushing yourself. Sad, really. Thanks, Liam. Michael, why do so many people hate the good for being the good? Why? I've said this many times, because of altruism, because altruism, altruism teaches them to resent other people because they're supposed to sacrifice to other people, particularly to resent the people who seem to be successful. Why aren't they sacrificing more? How come they got to be successful? A zero-sum world could cause, a zero-sum view of the world could cause people to hate the good for being the good. If they're succeeding, I must be failing. Their own hatred of reality, their own hatred for whatever reason, their own hatred of the world and reality could cause them to take on envious hate the good for being the good. So there were a lot of reasons why this could happen, psychological and ideological. If you pick up the wrong ideas, like altruism, it'll lead you to this. If you pick up the ideas of zero-sum world economically, it'll lead you to this. It's the inevitable consequence of. All right, Artin, your thoughts on Iranian oil nationalization? Well, I mean, it's a huge violation of the rights of the companies whose oil was nationalized. The West should have never allowed it to happen. The United States tried to fight it by helping basically replace the prime minister of Iran with the Shah. But then the Shah then nationalized the oil. So they obviously didn't do a good job of it. They didn't make it clear what they were doing and why they were doing it. It's one of the great travesties and tragedies of history that these barbarian regimes get to benefit from oil that was really developed, produced, piped, technologically discovered by Western companies that then it was stolen from them. Michael, as much as we complain about economic decay, there are more millionaires and billionaires out there than ever before. How can this be? Well, because there's still opportunities to create value. There's still opportunities to make a lot of money. We're not in a depression. The economy is not shrinking. The economy is growing, and it's growing in real terms. There's still values to be made. So in spite of the fact that we talk about economic decay, but the reality is that the economy is growing. It's not decaying. It's just not growing as fast as I think it could, and I think it should. So it's decaying relative to its potential. But it's still growing. Things are better. I mean, I'm sitting here in a hotel in Miami surrounded by skyscrapers. These homes are very expensive. People are living in them. There's some amazing restaurants. I mean, there's a lot of wealth. There's real wealth in this country. real wealth. And that is a result of, some of it's a result of the manipulation of interest rates and the Fed and everything like that, low interest rates and money, cheap money and easy money. But most of it is the result of production. People are producing, people are creating, people are building. And the fact is, the US economy still grows. It's not shrinking. In spite of all our complaining, we're not in a depression. Michael says, does the phenomena of white trash come from Christianity suppressing the mind? I don't know. I mean, why white in particular? I mean, trash generally. I think people who are not ambitious, stuck, poor, relish the poverty or embrace it or just accept it. I don't know that that's unique to Christianity. It's probably in every culture there are people like that who given up, not interested, don't care. Right? And uncivilized. I don't think that's unique to Christianity. So I think it's bad ideas, it's bad psychology, and partially it's encouraged by the welfare state, because the welfare state allows them, in a sense, to survive without working, without being ambitious, without pursuing values, just by the very mere fact that they are alive, they can get welfare and they can survive, and that is wrong. Right? I don't think it's just Christianity. I think there are a lot of ideological systems that lead to the same thing, or a lot of approaches, but it can also just be purely psychological. But the reality is, bad ideas lead people to be unambitious and uncivilized and not care, which is making the most shocking thing of it, is the not caring. And again, the state perpetuates this by not allowing them fully to suffer the consequence of their own actions. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you to all the super chatters. Really, really appreciate the support. Don't forget, you can support the show also on Patreon and on PayPal. YaronBrookShow.com/support. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. That would be fantastic. That would be great if we got more subscribers from these shows. So please consider subscribing. And don't forget to like the show before you leave. Just give it a thumbs up. Doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps with the algorithm to expose more people to the show. I will see you all. We'll see about tomorrow. It depends. I might need tomorrow to prep. If not, I'll definitely try to do a show on Wednesday, and then we'll be back at home on Thursday. Bye, everybody. Have a great evening.